All righty. What is this, huh? Okay, so please mute your speakers. Thank you. There's a little bit of a lean. Josh, would you like to introduce us? We sure are.
How they change over time. And so I ended up working on a whole lot of living animals, but then also lots of old dead ones. I really like working on the heads of crossbirds and dinosaurs, but we also work on lizards, turtles, and early mammals. See you later.
Hey, so Scott, you still have your thing on, isn't it?
Oh.
It's good, it's good.
That's why you guys are paleontologists. You're not technology
People are
experts.
saying they can't hear.
Yeah, they should be able to hear fine now. It's good. All right, Joe. Let's go to who else hasn't had a chance to? Everyone, Scott.
Yep, next we have Scott Williams.
Hello, my name is Scott Williams. I'm the couple titles at Museum of the Rockies. I'm the interim director of exhibits, also the paleontology lab and field specialist. I've been involved with vertebrate paleontology for over 20 years now. Worked here at Burpee Museum of Natural History for many of those years and helped, with Josh's help and others, create the paleontology program here. At Museum of the Rockies, we focus primarily on late Cretaceous. We do have some late Jurassic sites that we collect and work at, but for the most part, it's been Cretaceous. And so I've worked on things from Tyrannosaur sites, Mosasaur sites, turtles and crocs. So I'm a bit of a generalist, and also have done a fair bit of collecting and work on Middle Ordovician trilobites and fauna from northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin.
All right. I suppose I could tell a little bit about myself. I am the director of paleontology here at the Burpee Museum of Natural History. I actually took over for Scott Williams when he moved to Montana several years back. My primary work is out in Montana in the Hell Creek Formation, as well as southern Utah in the Morrison Formation, where we have a large bone bed, the Hanksville Burpee Dinosaur Quarry, which Scott and I started working back in 2007, and we continue every summer to this day. I am currently working on my PhD at Northern Illinois University, trying to wrap that up, and I'm working in the Hell Creek Formation, looking at the geology of the area where we work and kind of how microvertebrate assemblages changed throughout the 1.5 million to 2 million years of deposition of the Hell Creek. So up until that KT boundary, that mass extinction that happened and ended the reign of the dinosaurs. So we continue working on that here at the Burpee, and we will continue going back to Utah and Montana for the foreseeable future.
You know, before we get any, we don't have a whole lot of questions, but there's some gorgeous art up here. Joe, can you talk a little bit about this beautiful image?
Yeah, this is an image that one of my paleo artist friends, Andrea Tuchin, who now lives in Calgary, Canada, put together based on some of the work we've been doing in the northwestern part of New Mexico. This is an area known as the Fruitland Formation. And so you can see a cool horned dinosaur that's Pentaceratops, along with the crested hadrosaur Parasaurolophus and some of the early tyrannosaurs, so T-Rex ancestors in this scene.
All right, cool. I know we have a lot of questions coming in, some of which came in by email, so I'll be pulling those over, but go ahead and chat about some. Maybe, Josh, you want to start off with some very basic questions for some of the folks that are up here?
Well, I'm going to start right here with Kiersten. Can you tell us a little bit about your research for your dissertation? Kind of, what you do?
Okay.
More than the brief introduction.
Yes, and I also don't think anybody heard my introduction, so it's good that I only talked for like a minute. So I am really interested in major evolutionary transitions, particularly from a morphological point of view. So how animals transform when they go between really major environmental shifts. So sea to land is a really famous one with the walking fish that would evolve into all of us tetrapods, animals with 4 legs today, as well as the sea to land. So animals like whales, which had land ancestors that evolved aquatic morphology over time, land to air, which happened many times in animals, insects, in reptiles like pterosaurs, and then eventually birds, where they evolved flight morphologies. And so I studied the land to sea transition because I really love animals that swim. So I compare the way marine reptiles and the way marine mammals evolved into aquatic environments. And my research in particular is interested in whether or not the locomotion that their land ancestors had might have impacted the way they could evolve certain locomotions in their aquatic environments. For example, if something walked on land the way a mammal walks, so kind of very ski line, straight, one leg in front of the other without a lot of spinal bending, if that impacted how an animal could evolve its aquatic swimming type, if it's going to use its limbs to swim or if it's going to use its body and tail to swim. And consequently, on the other side with animals like lizards, where they have kind of bending of the side to side of their spine and really sprawling locomotion, that may have impacted the way animals that walk like that on land might have evolved into aquatic environments if they were going to use their limbs or their body or tail to swim. So that is what I do for my research, and hopefully I'll be finished in a year. Yay.
Excellent. And just kind of a quick follow-up. I think when people think of paleontologists, think about going out in the field, digging up dinosaurs. Paleontology is a very, broad in what we study. It's pretty much all life, anything that had existed in the past. But some people do field work. Some people do just straight museum work, lab work, whatever. Have you had a chance to do any field work in the field?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's a great question because I do the other side of paleontology than a lot of people think about. I have done field work, definitely. In fact, my first major field work was last summer, where I did some Cretaceous work in New Mexico and also some Triassic work, also in New Mexico, at a different place called Ghost Ranch. But my research is mainly focused on collections. You can see kind of the photo in the background. It's a photo of me holding the lower jaw of a mosasaur, one of the animals that I study. And I'm what I call a museum hopper. So my total amount of museums for my dissertation studies is 18 museums when all is said and done, where I will be collecting all my data. Those are museums between North America and Europe. It'd be really great to get to China as well. And that's also a museum on the list, at least for the future, maybe not quite in my PhD. But yep, I go around museums, pull out the drawers and measure the bones.
Excellent.
I think I'm gonna, since the volume wasn't working really well earlier, let's go down to Amelia Zietlow as well and kind of tell us a little bit about your dissertation you work on and if you do any field work.
Okay. Yeah. So my dissertation is also focused somewhat on this land to water transition, but specifically in mosasaurs. So what happened, but like a different aspect of it. So instead of the locomotion, I'm more focused on what is happening to the shapes of the bones in the skull and the rest of the skeleton. And I'm doing that by comparing mosasaurs to their living relatives, to living lizards, and seeing what kind of patterns I can see. So that my work also primarily involves looking at specimens in drawers at the museum and measuring them, photographing them, taking notes. But I have done some field work on dinosaurs in Montana in the Hell Creek Formation, so things like Triceratops and T-Rex.
Excellent. We do have a question. We have someone who asks, we have a middle schooler from Rochelle are curious to know how the Grand Canyon formed. Anybody want to take this one up? Okay, I guess I will. Well, if any of you have been out to the Grand Canyon out in Arizona, you'll notice there's a river at the bottom. So the Grand Canyon has been flowing through for millions of years as it is running from basically the eastern or the western slope of the Colorado or the Rocky Mountains toward the ocean. It basically has been incising and cutting down through all those layers of sedimentary rock for millions and millions of years, and it will continue to basically carve down through those rocks. You see it in many places. The Grand Canyon's not the only canyon there is in the world. There's canyons all over the world where these high velocity, high energy rivers are just continuing to cut down into these soft layers of sedimentary rocks. When you hit the harder igneous rocks, these granites and stuff, they don't cut nearly as deep nor as fast, but it takes millions of years. These aren't things that happen overnight or over the course of 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. It takes millions and millions of years for these rivers and streams to cut down through these layers of rock, representing, again, millions of years. I believe the basement rock at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is in the billions. I think it's the Vishnu Schist is one of the lowest members of the Grand Canyon, and I'm not exactly sure that the age of that, but I believe it's billions of years old. So it's that river has been cutting down through layers of rock that represent a lot of time.
We got another question from email. Who wants to take that?
All right, whoever wants to take this, why did you choose to study prehistoric animals?
Oh, okay, fine.
Let's go with Joe.
Oh, well, prehistoric animals, I think just like any paleontologist, I just never grew out of loving things like dinosaurs and other weird fossil creatures. And I think it's because they are it's just amazing to think about living in a place where these animals used to walk, where they used to move around. And so I really wanted to understand more about them and also the world that they lived in. So reading the rocks, kind of like a book, trying to understand what the past was like is what drew me into studying things like prehistoric animals, especially dinosaurs.
Excellent. What are some of the most exciting things that you have found in the field? Let's throw this one to Scott.
Fossil turtle. No,
He's not
I say
serious?
that mostly to aggravate dinosaur paleontologists who expect me to say T-Rex or Triceratops. I have found both, and it's been a really fun and a learning experience to collect those. And of course, when you collect a Tyrannosaurus, you automatically get into this very spirited group of enthusiasts and researchers who just go bananas for Tyrannosaurus Rex, and there's debate on how many species we now have of Tyrannosaurus. But in the field, for the longest time, one of the things that was took so long for me to find, even though there's pieces of turtles everywhere in the Hell Creek Formation. You find turtle shells. The top part is the carapace. The bottom is the plastron. You can find them at microsites where you find other small fossils that tell you what was living in the Hell Creek Formation. So the Hell Creek Formation dates between 66 and 67 million years ago. It's found in eastern Montana, the western Dakotas, and has some different names and formations up in Canada and down in Wyoming. And it represents the very end of the age of, quote, dinosaurs. So that's when T-Rex and Triceratops lived. At the same time, there were crocodiles and turtles and small mammals running around. It was a very diverse environment. It was more similar to what you see in the Gulf Coast states today. So if you're down in northern Florida, southern Louisiana, that's kind of like what the environment was 66 million years ago in eastern Montana. The turtles were around. There was lots of types of turtles. And for over 10 years, I was collecting bits and pieces, and then finally came across a site where we had complete turtles with not just complete shells, but their skulls and their arms and their legs and their tails. And I got very excited because the same day someone else found a fairly complete Triceratops, and we came back and I was more excited about the turtles than the Triceratops, and most of the people out with this thought I was insane. But turtles are really cool, and they can tell you a lot about the environment. And they are, even today, turtles are a species of reptile that are affected by climate change, changes in the environment. And when you start to see a change in the diversity, that usually tells you something. So turtles, I think, are pretty important. Shouldn't be ignored. That was Casey. I didn't do that.
Chaos.
Who else? I think we should get another one. Don't you think, Josh?
Take it away, Casey.
I don't actually get to do a lot of fossil field work, but I had found a baby direwolf puppy in a den or a little sinkhole, Lake Pleistocene in Florida. He gets scratched its little head.
Really?
Very good boy. And then I was suffering from heat exhaustion in the Mesa Verde of Colorado one hot summer, and I was busy actually following a golden eagle around rather than looking at the ground. And I followed the eagle to its nest, where I found lots of bones of recently living animals, and there I found a vertebrate hadrosaur buried in the cliffside right there, and that I think was my first dinosaur monster.
Kiersten?
Sure. So I don't have a lot of experience, but to me this stood out because it was the first vertebrate bone that I found. But so the person who was leading our fieldwork expedition said, all right, we need to find some new stuff, go out and prospect. So me and my lab mate went out and we found a tyrannosaur rib. And it was the first thing I ever pulled out of the field. It was really cool. And underneath the rib was another bone element. We're not sure what it is, and that will be prepped soon. But it was just really exciting that as we moved away the rock and the rib was already beautiful, to see this other bone. And it's just neat because I can say that the first vertebrate fossil that I found was a probable tyrannosaur, probably more like the species called a Bistahiversor, which is where I was in the Bisti Basin in New Mexico. So that was really, really exciting.
My first one actually wasn't, I can't say it's the most exciting thing I ever found, but my first find, and Scott probably doesn't remember this, but back in 2005, when I was on my first field expedition out to the Hell Creek Formation, we were working on what turned out to be a Triceratops ilium, part of the pelvis. And I just started hiking around, and I found a little bone coming out of the wall, and I was just ecstatic, excited, like, oh my God, this is a bone. So I went and got Scott, and he walked over and he started poking around the hill with an awl, and it fell out. It was literally a piece of rib about that big. Nothing super special, but to me that was incredibly exciting, and he probably had a smug look on his face, like, what the hell did you take me away from the quarry for this for? But to me it was cool. It was super exciting. So how about you, Amelia?
So probably two things. Both last summer and both on the same day, I think. One was also a turtle, but it was like a teeny tiny little turtle beak, which was very exciting. Yeah.
Great.
And I also found that same day what looked like a rock, and then I turned it over and I was like, oh no, and I got very excited. I went to my advisor. I'm like, is this? He's like, yes. It was a chunk of the head of the head-butting dinosaurs of the dome, which I don't think we don't find them very often at all. So that was very exciting.
How about Dr. Surdich? Now, I think of all of us here, this is no disrespect to any of you up here, but Dr. Surdich works in one of the coolest places, I think, on Earth in terms of finding dinosaurs. So how about you? What's one of the most exciting things you found, of many, I'm sure?
Yeah, it's hard. I usually spend between 3 and 7 months every year out digging, living in a tent. So it's hard to narrow that down. But I think the first big dinosaur find I made was probably the most exciting. That was in Madagascar. The very first time I went to Madagascar, I found some bones of a meat-eating dinosaur called Majungasaurus sticking out of the hill. It turned out to be the sacrum, so part of the pelvis and the hip area. And as I cleaned forward from that, I found the next bone, and then I found the next bone. And then after about a week of digging, I had the entire articulated skeleton all the way to the skull with all the teeth intact. And that was a really cool dinosaur. It's already a really well-known dinosaur. And I think the coolest thing about that find is that quarry has turned out to be the best place in the Southern Hemisphere for birds.
Is this the one?
It's been
that I put
loaded
up?
with birds. Yeah, so it looks a lot like that dinosaur in the front, the one that's sucking on that fish in the foreground. And so that was a cool find. It was a cool individual dinosaur, and then the site itself has turned out to be really scientifically important.
We got a second grader that has a question that could go around the horn as well.
All right, well, Elias, second grader, wants to know, what was the first dinosaur you found? Let's throw it to Scott.
I've been waiting for this one. Okay. So I think someone mentioned Pachycephalosaurs just a little bit ago. So Pachycephalosaur is the bone-headed dinosaur, the domed dinosaur that lived in the latest Cretaceous, found in the Hell Creek Formation. And that was one of the first ones that I found myself. It was 2000. It was literally the first summer that we'd ever been out in the Hell Creek Formation in eastern Montana. Myself and Michael Henderson, who the former curator here, were out just kind of exploring and fact-finding. We were with the University of Wisconsin, and we were looking at some public land sections that you can get permits for as a potential area for Burpee to begin collecting. So we didn't actually have a permit at that time to collect anything. We were just walking around looking at stuff, and it had been kind of a long day. Michael went back to the truck and was sitting down, and I was walking through these coulees, which are these kind of weathered out areas in the Hell Creek Formation. And the Hell Creek is kind of a soft rock, so it's mudstones and sandstones, and it weathers. It often referred to as badlands. And I was looking up at the hills, as you do, because you're walking along the base of these, you're looking for bones that have weathered out, and there's chunks coming down, and hopefully you'll find the chunks in what we call float, and you'll follow it up the hill, and there's a bone going in, and you start digging back, and there's more bone, and that bone's connected to something, and so on and so forth. That's the theory, at least. And so I'm sitting there walking around looking, and I kicked something pretty hard because I was just trucking along and boom, kicked something and it rolled over that way. And I turned and looked and I go, the heck is that thing? And it was this big round thing, like about this big. And I was pretty new. I was green. This is my first, and I looked at it, and then Michael came out, and we were both like, there's no way that's a pachycephalosaur dome, especially on our first, foray. And that's what it was. It was a pachycephalosaurus dome. It was the bone-headed round part of the skull, and it was huge. It was thick. It was 7 or 8 inches thick. It had this weird depression in it that we later found out to be a pathology, basically a healed injury. We didn't have a permit, so we couldn't collect it. But we were
Wow.
planning on coming back next year. So here's what we did. I dug a hole, put it in the hole, and then I covered it up, and I took a bunch of rocks and put a big X over it because we didn't even have a GPS at the time. And so then we came back in 2001, and that was the first thing we went and recollected for the museum. And that's in section 9, which is this prolific area that Burpee continues to collect in today. So that was my first find, was a Pachycephalosaurus that I punted like a soccer ball. So.
X marks the spot. And that is actually current. If you get a chance to come to the Burpee Museum, that's actually on exhibit up in the Homer exhibit as well. So, and we've actually been lucky. We've gotten, I think we have 3 pachydomes now. One came from our Ninja Turtle site a few years ago, and yes, with you, I don't think the third one is from off the top of my head. How about anybody else? Anybody else got want to chime in about their first dinosaur? I think mine was a Triceratops. It's that little piece of rib I just told you about. We can't really tell.
Chunko something.
I have a weird story, I guess.
Do
All
tell.
right, weird is good.
Well, so I grew up in Florida and we didn't have dinosaurs. So, the next question coming up maybe is mammals. But the first dinosaur I got to kind of quote unquote discover and identify was I was working in the lab at the Field Museum, and we got a jacket that was collected in 1922 outside of Calgary, in Alberta, Canada. And we opened up this jacket, and it was covered in all this newspaper from Calgary in 1922. Boots were cheap then. And inside of it was basically the back half of an Albertosaur dinosaur, a relative of T-Rex from the time. And so the folks that had dug that up and jacketed up, and it got lost in the basement of the Field Museum for, 1998 to 2022, however many years that was, like 80 or something, I don't know. And inside of it was this really cool animal. It's named Elmer. Elmer Riggs, one of the people that dug it up, and it's doing tours or something, living somewhere these days. But yeah, that was my first dinosaur. Cool.
You want to segue into mammal?
My first mammal I ever found was, in Florida we had lots of things like giant ground sloths, dire wolves, tapirs, which are the little, short-nosed elephant nose like relatives of rhinos. Actually, we have lots of those. But also, really, my first mammals were little three-toed horses called parahippets from 18-million-year-old sinkhole in northern Florida called Thomas Farms. They also had alligators, but that's not a mammal. Or dinosaurs.
Parahippus?
Uh-huh.
I'm going to try to put it up. Yeah, I got him.
I don't know what my first mammal was, but out at least in Hell Creek where we were, mammals are pretty rare, and they're mostly found by their teeth. So there's a lot of multituberculates with this, which is an extinct group of mammals. But a few years back, I found a really nice jaw to a didelphodon, which is this kind of like badger-sized animal in the Hell Creek, and it was a jaw with 2 or 3 teeth in it, which was pretty exciting for me because, again, mammals are relatively rare in terms of their jaws and stuff. You can occasionally find teeth. So I don't know what my first one was, but that was probably the most memorable one that I found so far.
Because I'm not as fast as finding your overlays, you're going to get a didelphodon in a second. I hope. All right, ready? Am I right? Oh, wait for it.
Coming.
Josh, describe it.
So exciting. Oh, there it is.
Oh, beautiful.
So cute!
It looks like a mean otter.
I think I have the horse too.
Very sleek.
The horse might not be so cute.
All horses are cute and scary at the same
Oh.
time.
Someone should look at my downloads folder and then
So while we're doing this, I actually wanted to go back to a question that I think only one person answered, which was, why did you choose to study prehistoric animals?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a really great question. Oh, there's a horse. Yeah.
Is this the one? No, I can't tell because his feet. Is that 3 toes?
It's got 3 toes.
It's
So,
close.
Yeah, a little late.
And
Yeah.
its 5th leg there.
All right, my bad.
Yeah, but so I'll say really quick. I chose to study prehistoric animals because I've always wanted to know how the land and the world and the life around me came to be. I was always very interested in nature, and when I looked at nature, I didn't just take it at face value. I was very interested in like, wow, where did this come from? How did this get to be this way? And honestly, studying prehistoric animals is the way you really understand our modern world. You can't understand the present without understanding the past, and vice versa. You can't really understand the past without understanding the present. So I just wanted to go back and address that because I think it's a really important thing. People are like, oh, studying paleontology and dinosaurs, whatever. Why is that important? It is crucially important to understanding so much of our, if not all of our modern world. So if anyone ever says, oh, studying dinosaurs and fossils, that's pointless, I can really rip into them for why it's not pointless. And the first mammal I found was just a whale vertebra in Southern California. You can just walk around lots of places and they're just there all over the place. And they're missing a lot of the processes off of the centra. So the centra is like the main body of the vertebra. So you would miss it at first if you didn't have a trained eye. And my eye is barely trained, but you can see these kind of big discs, like dinner plates of whale vertebrae around SoCal. So that's my mammal fossils. So I think I did 2 questions in one. So efficiency, woo!
We'll allow it. Didn't you guys, Joe, didn't you guys find a pretty cool mammal over in Madagascar? Or did Dave work on that?
Yeah, we did. That was actually an accidental find. So I was out again in Madagascar in a really remote area. So this took several days to get to, and there were just random bones coming out of a hill. So it looked like what we would call a lag deposit. So it was just full of things like fish and dinosaur teeth. And rather than just collecting the teeth off the surface, I decided to put a field jacket. So I put plaster all over this lag deposit, and I collected a huge block. I got in huge trouble from my advisor at the time because then he had to export that back to the US, which cost lots of money. But then when we got it back, he changed his mind because we stuck it in a CT and right in the middle of that lag deposit. So I had just shaved the tip of it off with my rock hammer. I didn't know what it was a complete mammal skull from a type of mammal that had never been found other than teeth before. It's called a Gondwana tear. And so the most complete skull of that mammal was in this really lucky find. And I just happened to grab the right chunk of rock from Madagascar and ship it to the US.
Nice. All right, I got, here we go. We got a 5th grader.
All right, Dahlia asks, 5th grader, she wants to know, what has been the largest fossil you have found? Oh boy. Yeah. Well, I know several of us up here have worked on sauropods, which would, without question, be the largest dinosaurs that I've worked on. We have our Hanksville Burpee Dinosaur Quarry out in Utah. We've got at least 20 dinosaurs in this one quarry, and majority of them are sauropods. The long-necked dinosaurs, Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Camarasaurus. Now they're big. However, the ones we're digging up in the quarry are actually not adults. One femur, so one leg bone, your upper leg bone, the thigh bone. Some of these animals that we're collecting have a 4 to 5 foot femur, which is huge. It's a huge animal, but it's not an adult. An adult animal can be significantly larger than that. Sauropods or any animal really, but those are definitely the biggest ones that I've worked on. Sauropods, I've never got to work on an adult T-Rex. Some of that might wouldn't rival the largest sauropods, but that would be the next closest. But how about anybody else?
So I didn't find this like just me, but our whole field team, they found it first. They pulled it out of the rock, and then we were like on another site, and then we came back like, oh, look what we found. And it was this giant Hadrosaurus scapula. So scapula is going to be your shoulder bone, and for dinosaurs, it's an incredibly long bone, has like this kind of wider end, and it like tapers off into this long kind of flat part. And so massive bone. I thought it was a limb bone at first of some bigger dinosaur, and these hadrosaurs were in fact huge. So yeah, that was the biggest one I found, which is cool. And also just to go back, one for the commenter, think like a scientist, for what U.S. states collected the most fossils. I don't know about the state itself, but the states that produced the largest amounts of fossils per Google are Montana, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. So answer that one for you too. More efficiency. All right, thank you.
In that order, Montana ahead of Utah?
I don't know if it's in that order, but it says for example, 6,000 different fossils have been found at a single dig site in Emery County in Utah. So just the big open
Emery County?
landscapes.
That's just north of the Hanksville quarry. One student, Sarah, a second grader, asked, "What kind of sea creatures have you found?" And since we have two marine reptile researchers here, Amelia, and have you had any?
I have not had field work finding my own critters, unfortunately.
Pure
so-
shale is out there. You gotta ask Dr. Cub to get down there.
I should. I did get though, actually in a river in New Jersey, just sifting, I found a shark spine. So that was kind of fun and a lot of shark teeth, but no mosasaurs yet, unfortunately.
How about you, Kiersten?
No, I'm only like, I have 1 degree of separation from, at least in my museum, of people who went out to the Moreno Formation in Southern California, and they kind of did some prospecting, maybe found some bits and pieces of Western Pacific mosasaurs and marine reptiles. In North America, a lot of the really famous ones are from the Western Interior Seaway, which was this shallow sea that stretched all the way up through the United States and Canada. Back in the Cretaceous, but the Western marine reptiles are really, really cool and need more attention. And so, not that I have found some, but I would like to go and do some more field work in these late Cretaceous marine deposits of California, maybe pull up some more Plotosaurus material, but I think Camp found all of it back in the day. So they're at a lot of museums like the NHMLA and Berkeley. So
Scott was itching to answer that one too.
So a couple years ago, once I started working at Museum of the Rockies, there is a lot, in especially northeastern part of Montana, of a formation called the Bear Paw Formation. And the Bear Paw Formation is a marine deposit that records part of the transgression and regression of the Western Interior Seaway that Kiersten was just talking about, where the seaway basically bisects North America, and it kind of waxes and wanes over time. Eventually it goes away, but they're in the basic kind of central to western part of the United States. Good fossil record that tells us the type of animals that live there, the type of environment. And shockingly, the Museum of the Rockies doesn't have a really big bear paw collection. There's a few mosasaurs and odds and ends and things like that, but the focus had been for a long time dinosaurs. And so we were working a site up in near a town called Hinsdale, up in the northeast part of the state, in the Judith River, looking for dinosaurs. Judith River Formation is a formation that's older than the bear paw, and we were looking for duckbill dinosaurs and tyrannosaurs and things like that. We had a little bit of a rain day, and half of our team went over to another town, and we had a visiting researcher from Sweden, Dr. Johan Lindgren, with us, and he's a mosasaur expert, and he was out with us. We had a student named Richard Carr, who I'm going to make fun of here in just a second. And Richard is now a grad student under Laura Wilson over at Fort Hays. And Richard was getting into marine reptiles big time. And so there was a state section. We have public land sections in Montana that are for the state of Montana. So anything collected in there on that section and that land goes to the state repository, which is the Museum of the Rockies. And I had looked at it from a satellite image, and it looked really good. Lots of exposure, not a lot of grass or sage, lots of good stuff to hopefully find fossils in. So we went there, and almost immediately we started finding ammonites, which are the invertebrate fossils, the ones with the coils. They're basically cephalopods related to squid, octopus, things like that. And start finding bits and pieces of bone. And Dr. Lindgren almost immediately starts finding ribs poking out of the ground. And we start digging in those ribs. As I mentioned before, the further you go back, hopefully they get better. They're in better condition, and they were. They were getting better and better as we go back. So we start opening up the quarry. And it was definitely a mosasaur. We started finding shoulder blades, what we call the scapulocoracoids, big ribs. Like ribs that were, 2/3, maybe 3 feet long in that range. And we started finding something weird in the hill. And it was kind of big and complex, weird shapes. And one of the students from North Carolina State University, which was with us, was exposing it, and it was narrowing, kind of like a triangle, as we were going along. And I went to Richard and said, "Richard, I think this is a skull." Now, why I say that, and I'm smiling, is that we all think we find a skull at some point or another, and it's usually nothing. So that's kind of a running joke. Oh, it's a skull, and it turns out to be a vertebra or something. But I was pretty sure this was a skull. Well, Richard, even though he's 20-some years my younger, he likes to correct me. He's like, no, that's definitely a vertebra. I said, oh, okay, all right. So we kept going, and the student kept exposing more and more, and I could start seeing nice, big 2-inch long teeth. So I just let her expose more. And I said, hey, Richard, I need you to come take a look at this process on this vertebra. And so then he comes over and doesn't say anything. He's like, he actually did say a few things. There's a lot of swear words I can't tell you about right now. But it was a huge skull. It was nearly 1 meter long, so about 3 feet. We had both lower jaws. The only thing missing for this was a bone called the parietal, which is this top bone on the skull. Beautiful skull, slightly distorted. It's something that I like to rub into Richard from time to time. But I tell you this story because as we continue to work around in that area, hiking and prospecting, we found lots of other stuff. More work needs to be done with the bear paw formation. There's so much to be collected there, and we still don't know lots of things. We don't know. One of the things that those ammonites, the coiled fossils, these invertebrates tell us are where we are in the formation from in a perspective of time. So we don't really have a good idea on how diverse the bear paw is. Somebody should be working on it. There's so much of it. There's just as much. There's way more bear paw than there is Hell Creek up in that area. So I would certainly recommend anyone starting a field program that involves mosasaurs and marine reptiles to look at the bear paw. So it's a beautiful skull. It's under study right now at Museum of the Rockies. And we're actually going to be working on a new bear paw exhibit there called the Cretaceous Coastline, and it's going to be part of that exhibit. So,
well, with that being said, which is this, so for all you first graders, second graders, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders out there, a lot of times we get questions or just comments from people saying, "You're still finding dinosaurs that haven't found them all." We will continue to find fossils forever. So you may be 8, 9, 10 years old now. Stick with it. There's plenty of fossils, dinosaurs, mosasaurs, whatever to be found. So stick with it. Keep studying science, mathematics, and come out digging with us in another 10, 15 years from now. I do want to go back to
we're almost out of time, so I do want to have a chance. I have some photographs. It might be kind of fun to just, what's happening here, Joe?
I'm teaching my intern how to use his back while pickaxing. He was kind of noodle arming that rock.
So it's pretty hard
You got to
to,
put your back into really get a good.
for
good
some of these
swing.
kids that have never touched that rock, how would you describe it?
That is like going out to your driveway that's made of concrete and trying to pickaxe directly into the concrete.
Don't do that at home.
But don't do that. Do it to your neighbor's concrete.
And what's this all about?
That's using
COVID.
That was right at the beginning of COVID. No, that is a respirator for cutting rock. So if it's really, really hard, then we have to use a saw and we cut it into little cubes. And so when you cut,
Oh, you can kind of
it's
see
up
those here.
dust. Yeah, see the cubes that he's noodle arming. And then that's the plaster jacket that I mentioned. So we all use this technique. It's the same technique that's been used for 150 years in paleontology. This is plaster and burlap. This creates that hard shell, that cast that goes over the delicate bones.
What about this one? I think that's
Oh, yeah.
Kiersten.
So I was going to mention before when Scott was talking about ammonites. This is an ammonite. This is actually the first fossil I found in the field. It was just on the surface. I was at the Triassic-Jurassic boundary, and I picked this one up in the Jurassic. I was 2 feet away from the Triassic. No ammonites there. And then I picked this one up in the Jurassic about 1 meter away. So, yep.
What do we got here?
Oh, Oh boy. So that's me in the collections of the Kansas University Museum with the skull of Bunker. Bunker is, I saw there was a question about the largest fossil. I did not find Bunker, but this is the largest animal I've worked on. Bunker is, as you can see, has a skull that is as long as I am tall, and the entire animal is about 46 feet long, which I'd like to note is larger than any T-Rex.
Is that the same toy on your leg?
What? Yes, it is. That's my travel buddy that I bring to all of my collections visits and conferences.
Yeah, this is me at Ghost Ranch with a weirdly distorted photo, but I wanted to give it anyway. So that part of the, I don't know, the quarry that I'm in front of me is where all the fossils come out. You can see some foil actually in my shadow, and this is where we were kind of closing up the quarry because I found something really cool, but we couldn't get it out in time. So if anyone goes to Ghost Ranch next year, don't touch my foil. And so, yeah, the fossils are just pouring out of this. They're not articulated. They're like little bits and pieces, little limb bones, little vertebrae, and it's just this really soft clay. And there's, oh my gosh, there's got to be millions of fossils in there. It's really insane and amazing and exciting and very accessible work because it's not far from the road, so not a lot of hiking.
I want to pop back to one question here that I saw. It's from Autumn. She's a third grader. What is the smallest fossils you have found? So for me, some of the smallest fossils that I have found, I actually haven't seen with the unaided eye. When we were working on the Homer site, which is our subadult Triceratops here at the museum, I took samples of the rock, the mudstone. So it's really fine, small particles. And I took a chunk and I sent it off to a lab up in Canada, actually, in Medicine Hat, Canada. And what they did is they took that, they broke it down and they processed it for pollen. So pollen is, you know, if you're out here in the spring or anywhere in the spring and you start sneezing, that's a lot from pollen from the trees blowing in the air and getting in your nasal passages and causing you to sneeze. Pollen is very, I guess, durable and fossilizes really well in the fossil record. So even though you can't see it with your eye, the lab up in Canada sent me back slides that you put on a microscope. And when you look under the microscope, you can see all these tiny little, really cool, complex structures from different species of plants that lived alongside Homer during the late Cretaceous. So again, when we talk about fossils, fossils are evidence of past life, whether it's dinosaurs or mammals or plants or pollen. So pollen is really good at giving us evidence or giving us a way to reconstruct the paleo environment. So if you go out to Montana today where we work, it's arid, it's hot, it's dry, there's very little to no water. Go back 66.5 million years and it looked like Louisiana, looked like the coast, the Gulf Coast, lots of vegetation, very, very wet and humid. So we use this pollen to reconstruct what the environment looked like at the time. So again, can't really see it with the unaided eye. You have to have it processed at a lab and put on glass slides so you can see it through under a microscope, or scanning electron microscopes as well is where they get really teeny tiny smaller fossils. So fossils come in all different sizes, teeny tiny to huge. How are we doing for time?
We're about out. I mean, obviously,
Pardon?
we can be flexible, obviously, but we're about out of time. So
Well, let's.
we got a couple other comments if you want to grab onto them.
Do you all work on animals that lived at the same time? It seems like there's a range here of what times you're researching. Who works on the newest? Who works on the oldest? Looking here, I mean, most of us are Cretaceous and Jurassic, I think.
No, I'm not.
Well, you're much early.
Yeah, I'm early and late. Ha ha ha.
Well, do tell
Well,
us.
I study marine reptiles that evolved right in the wake of the end Permian extinction. But I know there's people here who study Permian stuff. No? Yeah, I'd say Casey definitely does Permian. So, but I think I studied some of the more recent things. I also studied pinnipeds. So pinnipeds include seals, sea lions, and walruses, and they evolved in the Oligocene and Miocene, and the Miocene ended only 5.33 million years ago. And so I also do include some fossils of even fossil modern seals, so some fossil sea lions, which were around within the last million years. So I think the seals keep me modern, pretty close to modern at least.
Yeah, we have collected some. Go ahead, Scott.
So this is for some of the students I saw send some stuff in there from Rochelle. So for those of you students who are from Northern Illinois or Southern Wisconsin, once you get below the glacial material, the soft stuff, the dirt and the till on top, you'll get down to a type of limestone. It might actually be limestone or a type of altered or changed limestone called dolostone. When you go by road cuts around here, you'll see it, that kind of layered, yellowish, slate-looking rock. It's down there in Rochelle, right there in the corner of 38 and I-39 is a big quarry. You've probably been by it many times. That quarry is from the Middle Ordovician period. And we've done a lot of collecting here for Burpee. We have an extensive collection from the Middle Ordovician from this area. The Middle Ordovician of this area dates about 453 million years ago. So that is much further back in time than T-Rex or Triceratops or your long-necked dinosaurs and so on and so forth. And there were no dinosaurs. This area where we are in Northern Illinois now was south of the equator. We were basically kind of like the Bahamas. And so the fossils that you'll find are marine. They're going to be snails. They're going to be trilobites. They're going to be corals, receptaculites, which is this type of algae. And so what we know from doing work in paleontology geology is that different geologic time periods have different animals in them. And there, for example, in the case of Apatosaurus or Brontosaurus, Brontosaurus never ever met T-Rex. They were separated by 80 million years. And so you have to go to these different formations to find these because they record or preserve different animals. So around here, great fossils here in Northern Illinois, but they're not from the time of dinosaurs. They're much older. Were there dinosaurs here in Illinois? Most likely, yes. Just across the river, the Mississippi River, down in Missouri, we have dinosaurs. We have duckbill dinosaurs, and if you go hop the river back to Illinois, southern Illinois, there's rocks that are about the same age, just no dinosaurs have been found in them yet, and they're mostly covered by forest and so on and so forth. So geology is a very important part of paleontology, knowing where you're at and what kind of rocks you're looking at and so on and so forth.
Elias asked, how many fossils do we have? A lot. In our museum, thousands, tens of thousands for sure. Denver, probably a lot more.
Yeah, I think we're close to 2 million now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, see, there's no shortage of fossils out there. Yeah, the problem is space, especially when you work on big dinosaurs.
Yes.
That's why working on small things is nice sometimes. You can get, well, geez, our microvertebrate collection alone, Scott's got to be 20,000. Actually, now that I think about it, yeah, it's probably around 20,000 or more. I'd say we collect close to 1,000 microvertebrates, so small dinosaur teeth, small salamander vertebrae, fish scales, stuff like that. So when you think of that, tens of thousands easily. Individual dinosaurs, not quite that much, but still a lot. In all the museums around the world, millions, easily tens of millions of specimens. And a lot of them waiting to be studied. So that's the one thing about our collections here at the Burpee. We go out every year, and everybody else here, and collect fossils every year. There's 2 people on staff here at the Burpee Museum who study fossils, myself and my assistant, Dan Large. We can't study everything in our collection. It'd be cool if we had the time and capability to do that, but most paleontologists don't study all different types of animals. They tend to specialize in a few things. I mostly focus on dinosaurs and some microvertebrates, but we have fish in our collection. We have mammals in our collection that I don't specialize. So although we collect this material to preserve in perpetuity. So it'll be here, preserved forever, cared for, and kept in our institution where other researchers from around the world, whether you're students or degreed paleontologists, can come in, look at what we have, use our data to add into to their data set to answer questions about paleobiology or evolutionary biology of certain groups of animals. So the more we have, the better picture we can, the better picture we have to understand these different organisms. So that's why I like bringing researchers to our collections. Like PaleoFest is great for us because you guys get to see hear about the things that they study, but they also get to look at our collections, and there may be something in our collections that I don't, know about or think is important, and they look at that, whether it could be one bone, one scapula to a mosasaur, doesn't mean much to me because I don't study mosasaurs. But if Kiersten or Amelia were to come in and find that might add to their data set to support or strengthen some of their conclusions of the research. So museums in general are important for a multitude of reasons, but collecting stuff is beneficial to the entire world about and can inform us of our natural history. So we'll keep doing it.
So with that, we'll wrap up. We are running another session at 1:00, and we can certainly readdress some of the questions, but we'll probably have another new set of questions. So we look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Have a great day.